The name of the chapter is Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya actually means it's considered as the highest form of knowledge in terms of the analytical knowledge or the knowledge of the absolute. And this is the place where we get to know about the truths or about the Brahman or the absolute. And this is one of the lengthiest chapter. It has 72 verses in this chapter. And this Sankhya philosophy gives us the very basis of our existence as what we are. Today, I'm not going to the depths of what actually is the Sankhya theory about, because it takes a bit of time and we have not entered into the zone where Lord Krishna talks about this Sankhya philosophy. So currently still Arjuna is in despondent state. So the ending of the first chapter, he just left his bow and arrow on the floor and he just collapsed himself, not knowing what to do. So the despondency still continues further for some of the verses. And after the Arjuna's emotional state is done, when actually the Lord Krishna tries to give the preaching, that's the time I will explain you the Sankhya philosophy or the journey of human consciousness in detail. But in a nutshell, to understand, it is just to make you understand that we are the part of universe. Universe, it's a cosmos, is made up of 5 fundamental elements, which we all know, we call it as Panchabhutas: the earth, fire, water, sky, and air. Sky is also termed as space. So these 5 essential elements or the Panchabhutas is what we are made with. So the philosophy evolves that from universe, we are born or we are part of universe. We are the universal, the basis of our existence is based with the universe. Just to get that feeling, they have brought up this clear-cut philosophy, which is very widely accepted, the Sankhya theory, which is discussed in Bhagavad Gita. There are various versions of the same Sankhya philosophy. Gargi, can you please go on mute? Okay. So there are different versions of this Sankhya philosophy, but the one that's discussed in Bhagavad Gita is in terms of the supreme consciousness and the individual consciousness, which will be discussed later in the verses. So the Sankhya philosophy, again, when we talk about the cosmos, they talk in terms of universal energy. So the modern science has not gone to the level of complete depths of the Sankhya, but as a correlation or as a modern theory of acceptance, we can consider this as the law of energy, where in physics also we state the law of transformation, where there is a set of energies and the energy before is equal to the energy after. And the E is equal to mc square is also the Einstein's equation, which gives or explains that matter and energy are interchangeable. So energy stored in matter can be converted into energy and energy can be converted into matter. So this is a kind of a correlation that we can strike with the Sankhya philosophy. And also the duality of light, meaning that the consciousness that exists within us is also the consciousness that is universally existing. So the same consciousness has the duality of universal existence and the individual existence. So that kind of duality is also brought in the modern physics through the duality of light, like it exists in both wave nature and particle nature. These slides were mainly for me when I was taking my kids' classes, so I didn't get time to clean up all this, so that they will mostly be able to relate the theory more aptly with the current physics. So in chapter 2, we have 5 to 6 segments. And in the first segment, the first 10 verses, till Arjuna's despondent state continues. And finally, in the verse 10, Arjuna will be ready to surrender to Lord Krishna. And the second part of it is verse 11 to 30, where the absolute truth, when we say that Brahma Vidya, the absolute truth is being given out by Lord Krishna to Arjuna in the verses 11 to 30. And from the verse 31 to 40 is a brief description of how a Kshatriya should act in the sense of conversation with Arjuna. It's in generalization, it is how we should act according to our duties. And in the verse 41 to 44, there is a description about the desire, read, and actions. What happens when the actions are driven by desire? And the next one is the desireless action leads to self-realization. They tell you what happens when you perform your actions based on your desires. And next there comes an explanation about self-realization, where the point is to make desireless actions. And from 54 to 72, there is an explanation of enlightened soul, or a person of stabilized intellect, which we term as Sthita Prajna. And the discussion of this person is given from the verse 54 to 72. So this is quite a big chapter. I think 18th chapter is the biggest with 76 verses, I think. After 18th chapter, chapter 2 is one of the longest chapters. So we will start with the first verse of the second chapter. Atha dvitiyodhyayah Sankhya Yogah Sanjaya Uvacha Tam tatha kripaya vishtam Ashrupurna kulekshanam Vishidantamidam vakyam Uvacha Madhusudanaha. So Sanjaya is narrating here. So he's explaining the situation to Dhritarashtra, and he's narrating the current state of Arjuna. He says, Arjuna, how Arjuna is like he's kripaya vishtam. He is fully filled with kripa, which is the materialistic compassion, and Ashru Purna Kulekshanam. His eyes are filled with tears. Ashru is the tears. Purna is completely filled with. His eyes is completely filled with tears. And Vishidam. He is totally in the despondent state. So, in such a state, Madhusudana is Uvacha Madhusudanaha. Lord Krishna is trying to speak to Arjuna, who is in the state of filled with materialistic compassion, with a depressed mind, and with his eyes full of tears. So Madhusudana here, the name refers as a slayer of demon Madhu. Here, the significance of saying Madhusudana is in a way telling Arjuna to act as what he is supposed to do, or to make him ready for fight, or to make him encouraged to fight. So all these three things are coming for Arjuna: the materialistic compassion, kripa, and lamentation is Vishadam, or the Vishidantamidam Vakyam is the lamentation, which is nothing but the Vishada Yoga, which we saw how this Vishadam started, how it developed, and how it ended. And because of that, his eyes are completely filled with tears. And these are all at the end of the first chapter we saw were because of the material world bondage, or the signs of ignorance of the real self. And the compassion that Arjuna is showing is like if a person is drowning inside the water or inside the ocean, it's like trying to save him or rescue him just by pulling his dress alone. So that is the kind of analogy that strikes here when he is feeling for killing his people for a righteous action. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Hutasva Kashmalamidam Vishame Samupastitam Anaryajushthamasvargyam Akirtikaram Klaibyam Masmagamaf Partha Naitattvayupapadyate Shudram Hrudaya Daurbalyam Yatvotishta Parantapa. So now Lord Krishna, first time talking to Arjuna in the whole conversation, we notice that throughout the first chapter, Lord Krishna was silent. He was just displaying his objectivity to whatever Arjuna was saying. He did not react, he did not respond, he was just listening. Now, this is the first statement that he's opening up to Arjuna. So he says to Arjuna, Arjuna, how have all these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. So this is totally a kind of insulting Arjuna, asking that, how did you make yourself so dirty in your mind with all the negative thoughts? Kashmalam is normally dirt or dust. How did you make it? And this is not at all fitting you. Here, Aryan means Kshatriya. And for an Aryan who is a Kshatriya, this kind of attitude does not hold good at all. And if you are holding this kind of attitude, and if you continue with this attitude, you are not going to go to a higher zone. Meaning, when he said he is going to go to hell and all, he clearly says here, Akirtikaram Arjuna means he is going to defame his being existence of Kshatriya. So he starts insulting him by asking these questions. How come you became so impure in your mind? How are you acting in such a way which is not fitting you? This will not lead you anywhere to a good path, but it will lead you only to becoming infamy. And the next verse he says, Klybiam Masmagam of Partha. You are not at all behaving in a manliness way. So this does not yield to any manliness. And it does not befit you. Casting off this mean weaknesses of heart, arise, O Parantapa. So here he uses two words to describe Arjuna. One is Partha and one is Parantapa. Here also it's like totally insulting only. How come you are so weak-hearted? Why are you not getting up and fighting? How did this is not a quality of a man. And why are you behaving like that? And the two names referred here were Partha and Parantapa. The significance here is Partha is the name that Arjuna has got as a son of Pritha, which is nothing but Kunti. As a son of Kunti, Kunti has advised Arjuna or sent Krishna to go and tell Arjuna to fight against them and get the kingdom back, which was their righteous share. So here it is like a reiteration to Arjuna when he says Partha that he should not forget what his mom has told him, that he should go fight and get back the kingdom. Parantapa is like he was actually who has won a lot of I think someone can go on mute. I'm muting everyone. You can unmute yourselves when you want to talk. Okay. So the Parantapa here refers to torture of enemies, and Arjuna has killed a lot of people and has earned the name as Parantapa. These two are to make him encourage in this context of insulting Arjuna. He is telling his actual friends, saying that how come you are in such a state, being a son of Kunti, being Partha and Parantapa, how come you can get into such a state? As a Kshatriya, we know they should not decline to fight and they should fight for the righteous cause. Arjuna is a son of Kshatriya, that's why he is an Aryan, and he is currently declining to fight. If he is declining to fight, he would be Kshatriya only for the namesake because he is not doing what he is supposed to do. So that's why he says Akirtikaram Arjuna, in the sense, if he doesn't fight, he becomes Kshatriya for the namesake and not by nature, and that would bring infamy to his father. So Kshatriya is not behaving like Kshatriya, which means he is not worth said to be the son of a Kshatriya. That is the infamy thing that Krishna was telling Arjuna. That's why he told such an attitude in Arjuna is not going to fit his personality, because it's not at all his personality. Arjuna might argue that he would give up the battle on the grounds of his magnanimous attitude for the most respectable Bhishma and his relatives, but Krishna considered that sort of magnanimity mere weakness of heart. That's why he says, how come you became Shidram Hridaya Daurbalyam? He says, how did you become so weak in your heart? But the same weakness Arjuna is considering as compassion, magnanimity, or a kind of sacrifice that he is trying to do by not killing his people and most respected people like Bhishma and Dronacharya. So this is a false magnanimity which he is thinking for himself. And this is, we saw in the first chapter also, authoritatively also, this kind of acts is not permitted. Fighting for a righteous thing is not considered as a sin in any of these smritis or the law books. And even in many of the spiritual gurus, if you see, they have always asked to fight against the injustice. Here, when we say the fight, it's not a battle for a own personal cause. The fight is for righteousness. That's why it's supported by the Lord. And these are different quotes that I found from different kinds of religious books where they say to fight to get the path of good. So breed up thy lions like a man is from Jehovah. I came not to send peace, but a sword from Jesus Christ. Fight for God and fight against forces of darkness by Zoroaster. And you shall fight the infidel. Obey, recompense. Disobey, chastisement. So this is from Prophet Muhammad. So it's not to think in the lines that the Lord himself is going and asking people to go for non-violence. One thing we need to understand is the fighting or being peaceful was the weapon that was taken by the people at appropriately for those times of society. You look at all the things in essence. The essence was to bring back peace, was to bring back to the path of good. But the instruments might be different. One time at one place of time, depending upon how the society existed at that time, there could be a means of non-violence that would have brought us into the path of good. But at another time of society where it was in total chaos and only thing was to resort to such kind of war, then the war was nothing but an instrument to restore peace. That is the essence we need to look into, and not the exact essence as why Lord Krishna told to fight, why Buddha told to be non-violent, or why other person told to be like that. If you go back and look at the essence of the things, it's because the society at that time demanded such a treatment. That's what we need to analyze and understand. So any questions or concerns still here? Hope all are able to unmute themselves.
Yeah, no doubt, Abhiti.
Okay. So the first verse was a description of Sanjaya, the state of Arjuna, with compassionate heart, eyes filled with tears and despondent state. He just says, the Lord spoke with Arjuna in these words, and the two slokas or the two verses told by Lord Krishna was totally insults. And what do you think normally we do when a person comes with such an emotional state to us and just sits near us asking for any advice? What will we do normally?
We will try to give some advice.
We will try to give some advice. Okay. Will you insult such a person?
No.
No,
At that point of state of mind?
no.
Let's
No.
analyze things further as why Krishna insulted Arjuna, or To such an extent, yeah, this was a very great insult. If you go to a person who is like a great warrior and say that you are not manly, how does that person feel?
Get angry?
Yeah, he'll get angry. So let's analyze further. So why did they have to fight? Is because they needed their righteous share of their kingdom. So they had to get into a fight. And what happens when they get into the fight? It results in killing of their near and dear for sure. And what is Arjuna's stance? When he kills near and dear, he cannot enjoy the kingdom without near and dear. But he is the one, he in the sense, the war was intended to get the righteous share of the kingdom. So that was the starting point for the war. And now his worry is that he cannot enjoy the kingdom without the near and dear. And we saw in the first chapter itself that the ignorance has come because of their Vishadam has come because of their ignorance. And this is also to say here that ignorance attribute, or because he is not attributing the happiness for the act, he is attributing the happiness with the external world. He wants kingdom for a righteous act, but after he gets the kingdom, he feels that he cannot enjoy it because there will be no one who are dear to him to see him prosper. Whereas the knowledgeable persons who has the right knowledge, when we mean knowledgeable persons, the persons who has the right knowledge of the truths of the mere existence, such persons attribute their success or happiness from their own self. They will never attribute their success or happiness to others. So they will never actually feel to escape from duties what they are supposed to do. So he was asking Krishna, is killing not a sin? And that was the question at the end of the first chapter. He was saying that this is papam, mahat papam and all. And Lord Krishna here at this stage he's a good friend of Arjuna and also a kind of guru to Arjuna because he was guiding him all along. And how did Lord Krishna respond to him in the verses 2 and 3? In the previous two verses, how did he respond? He responded in a very, very insulting way. And why do you think, are there any guesses? Why did he, or from your analysis, what can you say that why did he actually
Maybe
insult him?
because I feel maybe because Arjuna was totally in a state of very emotional state. So to make him fight, he has to come out of that state and make him a little angry on purpose. I think Krishna is doing this so that he's a little ready for the fight ahead, to bring him out of that state, his emotional state basically.
Yeah, he's trying to, I guess, provoke Arjuna, saying that,
exactly.
how can, yeah.
Okay. So he was, as you said, like he was trying to give him a psychiatrist kind of treatment. Only a psychiatrist, when you go to a psychiatrist, right? What does psychiatrist do? If he doesn't get what he wants, he will try out all the possibilities of triggering anger, making you happy, because at one point of stage, you will be able to open up completely without hiding anything. So that's the kind of state that Krishna wants to take Arjuna into, for him to completely let go of his ego and ask for advice. Till now, Arjuna has not asked. He is still saying, till the first chapter, he was just saying that this is right, that is wrong, this is logic, that is not logic, kind of thing. And this is the personality of Arjuna. There is a story in different versions of it, but all the 5 Pandavas and Draupadi would be going, when they were in the forest, they would see a fruit in the tree. In some stories, it's given as an apple and some as a mango tree. But there was a fruit in the tree which they saw, and Draupadi wanted that fruit, and they tried to pluck the fruit. But they'll come to know that that fruit is some sage fruit, and that is a very special fruit that will be coming only once in 12 years or something like that. So the sage would be very angry if the fruit is plucked. So they feel that they will get some kind of curse from him, and they will immediately go to Krishna and ask for advice. These things happen like that. What can we do now? Then Krishna will come and tell them, there is a way that we can put back the fruit on the tree. Each one of you should say the truth, one true fact about you. And whenever you say the truth, the fruit will start moving up. And when all of you, the 5 Pandavas and Draupadi, says the truth, then the fruit will go and get stuck. So everyone will tell, and what Arjuna says in this context is that he will say that I am a person who is very much fond of praises. I cannot live without praise, and I cannot tolerate insults. And only thing I want to do for sure is killing Karna. So this is the truth that he spoke at that point of time, which made the fruit move one step higher. So the true nature of Arjuna is he is a person who wants praises all the time. He is the one who longs for praises, and he himself declares that his life is not very important, but praises are very important for him, and he cannot tolerate anyone who insults him. At one stage, they say that when Dharmaraja started speaking some truth, which was a kind of insult to Arjuna, he went to a stage where he was ready to kill Dharmaraja, Yudhishthira also. So such was his behavior. So for such a kind of personality, Krishna started to insult because he knew very well that Arjuna will not tolerate insults. If his way of speaking is really compassionate, was the way really filled with the real qualities or saintly qualities, then the words of Krishna would not trigger any kind of further agitations in him. But if he is having ego, then for sure these insults will trigger some more agitations in him, and he is definitely going to speak something more. We will see what he is going to speak. So he asked, is killing not a sin? And we saw this. So this is compassionate attitude of Arjuna, which is coming because of materialistic compassion. And when we ask, does God not like beings who are compassionate? For sure, yes. But why did God insult him? Because he sensed that intentions behind Arjuna words is ego, and it is not the real compassion. His words are compassionate. His actions that he is showing outwardly display compassion, but the intention behind that word is not compassionate. That's why he insulted him. So we will see the next verse. Now Arjuna is, as we said, the insults have triggered some more agitations in Arjuna, and Arjuna starts talking. Arjuna uvacha katham bhishmamaham sankhye dronancha madhusudana ishubhih pratiyotsyami pujaharvarisudana guruna hatva hi mahanubhavan shreyo bhoktum vaikshamapi haloke hatvartakamamstu gurunihaiva bhunjiya bhogan rudira pradigdhan. So he says, again here Madhusudana refers to the slayer of the demon Madhu, or the killer of enemies. So he is saying that how can I counterattack with arrows in the battle? Men like Bhishma and Dronacharya, they are very respectable people. They are very honorable people. If they come and fight with me, how can I go and counterattack them? They are Pujahar Varisudanas. They are the people who are worthy of worship, right? When people are worthy of worship, how can I go and fight against them? So this is what he's saying from the state when he triggered that, why are you not manly? Why are you doing all these things? His reply to Lord Krishna is this: how can I go and counterattack a person who is worthy of worship? And further he says, Guruna Hatvahi Mahanubhavan. Instead of killing such a great people as my gurus. Shreyo bhoktum vaiksham apiha loke. I can go and beg in the forest instead of killing such a great souls. Even though desiring the worldly gains, they are superiors. If they are killed, everything we will enjoy will be tinted with blood. Gunjiya bhogan rudirak pradigdan. So whatever I enjoy after this will be the ones that are tainted with the blood of the great people. So see the intensity of movement of Arjuna. Being a warrior, he intensely tells now that how can I go and counterattack them? They are the people who are respectable, and I feel that the best thing for me is to go and beg and live in the forest instead of killing them. If I kill them and get the kingdom and enjoy, it is going to be only the one tainted with blood. So how can I kill honorable people like Bhishma and Drona? This statement that he is saying is actually a concept of defensive ego. Have you heard this term of defensive ego? Does anyone of you know what defensive ego is?
No.
Justifying his ego, giving the reasons why he is correct.
The defensive ego is like you put forth a statement such that no one can come back and counterattack you. It's actually defensive in the sense, I'll tell you an example. You go to a musical concert or anything, you feel that the person is not singing correct. Suppose I feel that the person is not singing the correct ragas. I might not be classically trained or not have much knowledge. If I am egoistic person upfront who shows ego on my face, I will tell that whatever you sang is correct. You accept or not, whatever you have sung is correct. It's open up for acceptance or rejection. So that is the normal ego, where you just show up what you feel. In defensive ego, it's like telling, I am a person who has no knowledge on Carnatic music, but still I feel that you have not sung correctly. So in that case, if a person comes and says that, no, whatever you are saying is wrong, you escape saying that, yeah, I told right. Anyway, I'm not educated, but I still feel. It's like showing as humble, but showing ego. So that is the way that now he is saying, because if you see Dronacharya, Bhishma and all, he is saying that like if those people are ready to fight, I am not ready to fight because I know better than them, or when they come and fight, I am still superior than them by not fighting and giving up the fight. I am saving their lives. So he feels him superior. This is not out of that humbleness, but this is coming out of his ego. That's the reason that he was not able to calm down with Krishna's insults, because he still has the conditioning of the ego. And these are not the true nature of saintly, the qualities of a saint. So this was the example I was saying. You go to a musical concert and start commenting on the performer. If you say that, I feel that this raga is not correct, it's up to you to accept or not. You're showing the ego up front. There people can come and say that whatever you have said is right, or they can come and counter you saying that whatever you have said is wrong, which you accept. You accept both. But the defensive ego is like, I'm not trained or educated in music, but I don't feel that this raga is correct. So this is a way of putting that, making feel that you are very humble. You tell that you don't know anything, but you are trying to point out the other person. So is this concept clear? Yes, sir. It is in a way to tell them that Bhishma and Drona are great. He's saying that they are all Guruna Hatva hi Mahanubhavan. They are all great. But he feels from inner that I am more greater than them, to forgive them and not to kill here. Because he's sacrificing here, right? He's saying that I want to go to the forest. Why? To beg for food and live there. Because he cannot enjoy, the kingdom will be, even though he wins, the kingdom or whatever after that he enjoys would be tainted with the blood. That's why he don't want to enjoy. So he says them as Mahanubhavan, in a way saying that they are great, but I am still more greater than them because I am the one now who is ready to sacrifice by not fighting. So this is not a real saintly quality, and that was rightly identified by Lord Krishna, and that's the reason he started the insult. If
Amita,
my
just a
grandfather,
question
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Is
Uma.
this defensive ego more dangerous than regular, like the ego? Because
Yes,
it's
right.
very.
Yeah, because ego, at least you know the right how the person is speaking. It's like how do you say, the poison inside but sweetness outside.
Hmm.
So that kind of thing is defensive ego. Ego is like, you know, it's a snake, it spills only poison. You
No,
know
but
upfront what it is.
what is the kind of person who has this kind? Because nowadays we see a lot of people's statements starting like this, right? I am not an expert, but then
See, that's what we
this is
cannot
not the
be an
way we
expert
do.
because we cannot know the intentions, right, Tuma? Because this can be found out when you know the intentions. Lord Krishna here was rightly able to find out Arjuna's mental state because they were emotionally connected.
Hmm.
He knew the intention there. For if someone else comes and talks, we really don't know, except if you are very good at finding what I studied from the psychological books is that for such a people, right, their mouth speaks nice words, but if you actually look into their eyes shows that pride or ego.
Hmm.
That's what I read
Hmm.
in the psychological books. So when
No,
their
but
eyes are
Amita, I'm still not clear with.
uh-huh.
See, the egoistic person, we know he's an egoistic person. We know that, and how
Okay.
to you praise that person, and then the person is happy, satisfied, and then he goes away. Okay, if you say that your raga is not correct, we say, okay, thank you for your suggestion or something. They are happy. But then the defensive ego person, what is the kind of reaction or how to what do you say, address such people in real life? I'm saying, if a
See,
person is a
those
defensive ego
persons are not at all looking, those persons are putting forth these statements for making them feel that they are superior to you.
Hmm.
So they are not looking for either acceptance or rejection. If you reject them, they're ready to escape with the point they have said.
Okay.
When you accept, they're fine because you accepted.
Okay. Okay.
But
Okay.
here,
Thanks.
yeah,
Hmm.
rejection or acceptance, both this person takes upfront. But this person you reject, he escapes.
Okay. So more dangerous, actually.
Yeah, it's more dangerous because the intention is not the right. It's actually to show the superiority. It's not actually to point out the right thing as right or wrong thing as wrong. It's just
Hmm.
like telling very sweetly or softly. And many people do it in these current things. They say that I don't know anything, but
Correct.
they start,
Correct.
yeah,
Correct. They start their thing like this.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
But not
Thanks,
every
Amita.
person would be like that because we really don't know the intentions. It could be true, it could be false. It again depends upon the thing that happens there. Really, you cannot say that every person who says this is a person who really means that. Some people really can mean.
But we can just accept, right? Just say, okay, okay, fine, and then just leave the person. So he is
See,
also happy, and we also just keep quiet.
yeah, this conversation is now not at all about what the other person takes it. The thing that we are talking from or trying to analyze is from the point how a person puts forth a statement. Now, this Arjuna state of mind when he says, Guru Nahatvahi Mahanubhavan, when gurus are great, the statement putting for that is that they are great. But see, I am sacrificing not to kill them. I am still more greater than them. To get that context, he is talking like this. It's not
But
really
how?
to say that.
Even
Yeah.
this statement which you have given here, I am not trained or educated in music, but I don't feel that this raga is correct. How can you say that the raga is correct or not if you're not trained in music? That means what? He's trained actually in music. That's why he knows that the
No,
raga is
that's
wrong.
what, no, the people. But he feels that it is wrong. And when you say that, no, this is correct, he will say that, yeah, okay, I'm not educated, right? I felt it's wrong.
Yeah.
But Abhita, how Arjuna is so confident that he will kill the gurus? How he is confident that he will win the war?
See, How is it's because of Lord Krishna? Lord Krishna is on the Dharma side. Everyone knew, even including
Ah.
everyone. Dharma is going to win. So it's not literally
Okay.
meaning Arjuna is going to go and kill with his own hands. But they are going to die if they are. They all have to die if they have to get their share.
Yeah.
Yeah. How means dharma? See, at any point of time, dharma is going to win, and Lord Krishna here represents the dharma.
So just because Lord Krishna is with him, he's feeling that what he's doing is correct, and he will definitely win, and he's definitely going to
Yeah,
kill
see,
them.
this was actually totally understood from the start point. So they know that they can win because of Krishna. That's why when people ask whether they want all that Ashkonis of thing or that, they will select only Lord Krishna on their side because they know they can win if Lord Krishna is on their side.
Yes. Okay.
So if he had not had this kind of egoistic thing, he should have said that they are all great people. Don't they know that they are killing? Don't they know that this is bad? Why are they? So he should have started like this. But his kind of attitude, that one, no. As normal people, we cannot be. But here, the place of Krishna here is depicted as a place of a psychiatrist who can really, when you talk, if you talk normally to a person, and if you go and talk to a psychotherapist, will the psychotherapist not able to be find out the intention with what you are talking? Because they are trained in that. They know the neuroscience.
Yes. Yes.
They can find out.
Yes.
So in the same way here, Lord Krishna is acting in the role of a guru, in the modern terms as a psychotherapist. That's why he was able to rightly point out. If we were there in that place, we would have felt very compassionate for Arjuna because, oh, the boy is saying that he don't want to fight, he don't want bloodshed and all. So this is a kind of very humbled ego. And this ego is mainly for escapism. He will not face anything. If that you go and confront with that statement, he will try to escape, but he will not confront. So any doubts here till here? And that's why I brought that story into picture, because that story really gave an idea for me also when I was going through the things as how, what is Arjuna's personality? Because if you don't know the personality of a person, you don't know what it is. Because here we understood that Arjuna is such a kind of person who is longing for praises, who longs for praises, and who cannot withstand insults. Knowing the person, the Krishna started talking. If two of them are unknown, then this kind of conversation or this kind of context would not have cropped in. So I'll continue in the next class with the sixth shloka, because I think that has to flow in a sequence. So until here, the first 5 shlokas, where the first one is the description of Sanjaya, the second and third is the Lord Krishna's insults towards Arjuna, and from the fourth, again Lord Arjuna starting giving his own kind of conversations. There all was the topics of the sins, philosophy and all he bought into. Now he turns that philosophy again into some kind of excuses and asking again, how can I do this? How can I do that? So the verse 6 we will see in the next class. If nothing, I'll close with the ending prayer. If you have